No doubt, and wallahi, there's no question, the media and television and the internet, but you know, this khutbah is not about blaming them and blaming those things. That's a reality. It's a reality I cannot change, you cannot change. What can we change? Well, what we do at home, how we filter those things out. I can't change the internet or Nickelodeon or whatever the music videos they're watching. This is the reality of the world we are living in. So instead of just blaming everything on that, and it might be true, there's a lot of blame there. Instead of blaming everyone else, ask yourself proactively, what can I do to better the situation? Yes, the music videos are there. Yes, the evil stuff on the internet is there. Yes, drugs are everywhere. But instead of just cursing and slandering and blaming, ask yourself, what can I do to protect my son and daughter? This is the proactive mentality. Instead of just every pointing finger, see what is reality. See what is the best way to raise your child. And I have some basic points of advice here. First and foremost, within this area of changing cultural paradigms, do realize, brothers and sisters, that our children, they do have a sense of know-it-all, a sense of I know better than my parents. Understand this. And they get this sense because of many facts of life. I mean, let's be realistic here. Our children know better than we do about technology. Our children know better than we do about the latest gadgets, about the latest this and that. And I will tell you, I grew up here. I thought that I knew this society and culture. Now that Allah has blessed me with children of my own, believe me, I don't know the difference between this and that. And sometimes my kid comes and tells me, oh, you need to get the iPhone 5 because this has this and this has that. And I don't know these things anymore because now I'm getting out of touch. Even though when I was growing up, and I grew up in a Western environment, I felt this way about my own father, that I'm more technologically advanced, that I'm in tune with everything. But this is reality, that when we reach a certain age, our children are more in tune with reality. Now, with technology. Now, let me ask you, put yourself in the shoes of that 10-year-old, that 12-year-old. When he knows his father does not know how to operate a computer as well as he does, when he knows every single gadget on the market, he is more aware than his father, isn't it natural for this 10-year-old to think, I know about life and reality and culture and society and people better than my father does? Put yourself in his shoes. Do you blame him? And then it is true, the media also, television also, it gives this sense that the parents are backward and the child is know-it-all and the child is right. Yes, it is true, we can blame the media, but let's also sympathize a little bit. Is it really this child's fault now to think this way? It's our job to educate the child. You know what? You don't know everything. You might know the iPod or the iTouch or the iThis better than I do, right? But you don't know human society. You don't know interactions. You haven't tested humanity the way that I have. You haven't lived amongst people the way that we have. And that's your job in a gentle manner to teach the child. And one of the best ways to do this, brothers and sisters, and this is very difficult for those amongst us who have been raised in a different society and culture. We need to learn, there's a common expression in America here, that parents have to be friends with their kids. You know, perhaps that's not going to happen, let's be also realistic. But let me tell you one thing frankly. Perhaps you're not going to be friends with your kids, but you will have to learn to have conversations with them that are beyond just rebuking or ordering or commanding. You're going to have to learn to talk to them and not at them. Look and now, examine your own life. When you talk to your children, what is it about? Is it always, do this, don't do that, how could you have done this? If this is your whole relationship with your son or daughter, frankly, you're setting yourself up for failure. When's the last time you actually had a conversation that was not rebuking, not commanding, not derisive, not sarcastic? Yes, they deserve a little bit of harshness once in a while, but if that's the only thing you can show them, what do you think their attitude will be of you? Especially when they grow older, especially when they hit the teenage years, especially when they get their car and they get their first taste of freedom. I agree, perhaps in our culture you can't be a friend to the child, okay, but you must be friendly with them. You must have some positive relationship that is above and beyond just rebuking and always getting angry at them. Have a conversation. What's happening? What's going on? What did you learn in school? Take them out. Spend some quality time with them. And this is one of the biggest differences maybe between the previous culture or the previous generation and our generation. That perhaps for many of us, our fathers didn't really go out and play soccer and basketball with us with our friends. Perhaps. And you know, I'm not criticizing that. Maybe that works back there. I don't know. But over here in this land, over here where we are, you have to have some type of friendly relationship with your own son or daughter. Let me put it this way. Let me be really frank here. If your son or daughter does not feel comfortable coming to you for a problem that they're facing, because of a mistake they might have done, then wallahi this is a very big problem. If your son or daughter has committed a mistake, and let's be honest, they're all going to commit mistakes because that's a part of growing up. Did you not also commit some mistakes when you were teenagers? Let's be honest here, right? If your son or daughter commits a mistake, and then they don't want to come to you for help to clear that mistake up, well then honestly, how are you being a good parent there? You need to have the doors of communication open. If your son or daughter is going through a standard problem of the teenage years, when they reach 13, 14, hormones are going to kick in. They're going to want to be interested in somebody of the opposite gender. They're surrounded by drugs, pornography is everywhere. If you're not going to open up the channels of communication, if your son or daughter feels awkward coming to you, well then they're going to go to another teenager. They're going to go to the internet. They're going to go to somewhere else for help. No doubt, maybe our parents could never have spoken to us about these issues, but I am telling you, as somebody who straddles both generations, we need to be frank with our children. We need to tell them about things, and honestly, they probably know these things before you mention them. But the very fact that you open up the topic, the very fact you take your 13-year-old son and you tell him about the problems of internet pornography, the problems of, believe me, every 13-year-old knows about pornography. Believe me, every single teenager knows about this. If you're not going to open up the door, if you're going to be so taboo, oh, I can't do this, well then, how do you expect him to come for help to you if something happens that he needs some help about? There has to be open channel of communication. Mothers, talk to your daughters about the realities of this world. Talk to your daughters about basic biological facts. Let them know that, listen, if you need any help, I'm here for you. Just give a generic statement like this. If you need anything, come to me first. I will help you out. Just generic statements like this so that they know that their parents are there to help them in case they need that help. Few more points. Now, point number 6 in our list here. The Quran tells us, وَابْتَلُوا الْيَتَامَى حَتَّى إِذَا بَلَغُوا النِّكَاحَ فَإِنْ آنَسْتُم مِّنْهُمْ رُشْدًا فَادْفَعُوا إِلَيْهِمْ أَمْوَالَهُم. To basically summarize, the Quran is saying, test your children with responsibilities. Test the orphans, in this case, that are being raised in the family. Give them responsibility and see how intelligent they are. So a part and parcel of raising children is to stop treating them like kids when they're no longer kids. As our children grow up to become young men and women, and when do they become young men and women? According to Islamic Sharia, when they hit puberty. And what that means at the age of 13, 14, 15 max, but usually 13, 14, Islamically speaking, these young children are now fully grown adults according to the Sharia, which means they are legally responsible for their sins, for their personal lives, for their salah, for their relationships. When they hit puberty, they are young men and women according to the Sharia. And I have said this many times before, one of the biggest complaints that I have about modern culture is this period of adolescence, of teenage years, where children are treated like children even though intellectually, biologically they're adults. Personally, I don't believe in this. You start treating a 13-year-old like a young man or woman, because they are at this stage a young man or woman. You give them responsibilities. Now obviously not all at once, you test them bit by bit. As the Quran says, وَابْتَلُوا الْيَتَامَى. And the verse is about an orphan, when do you return the money? But again, it applies to our own children. Give them responsibility. And our scholars of fiqh explain this, and they say, so you give some money to the child and you say, when he's in the marketplace, go buy this. And then see, does he buy the right item or not? And then you increase that responsibility. This is a part of our culture. You cannot pamper your kids until they're 18 years old. It's not going to work that way. Our children are going to face the real world, so we have to prepare them. Responsibilities at home. And yes, you can quote me on this to your children. Chores as well. It's a very important part of growing up. They're not always going to have their mother to clean after them. You have to have children learn to become self-sufficient. This is a reality for their own good. You need to wash your dishes. You need to take care of your room, clean your room, do your clothes. This is a part of the responsibility to grow up. If you're going to treat them like kids, well then, don't complain when they're 18 and they're still acting like kids. You need to start treating them like young men and women. And the final point, the time is of the essence here. There was much more, but time is of the essence. The final point that I have for today's khutbah, a good environment. Islamic environment, the masjid, Islamic classes, Sunday schools. And I put this the last because many of you put it number 1 and they don't realize this is in fact the very last issue. Number 1 is yourself. Number 1 is your own house. Number one is the family environment. If that is in order, everything else is secondary. But many families, they literally think of Sunday school or the masjid 1 hour a week to be the magic cure. They drop their kids off, then they pick them up at an hour, and then they complain and they say, Sheikh, my kid is rude to me. And that's the only exposure they have to Islam, is that 1 hour of Sunday school. No, this is the very last thing, but it is also important. Come regularly to the masjid. Let them see what is Islam. Let them see the Muslims. Let them interact with other Muslim children. And that's why here we are very eager about not just building a masjid. We want to build a family center. We want to build a place where our youth, they are pushing us to come and go. They're interested to come to chill out, to play basketball, to just socialize, because we want them to be in this environment. Islam is not just about the salah, it's about living your life. And that's what we want over here as well. So, yes, it is important, but I put this right at the end of the list because the most important is at the home. The most important is you and your wife. Then everything else is secondary. But outside of the house, what can you do? No doubt, outside of the house, the most important thing is to have a good environment for your children, to make sure that their friends are also Muslim children, that you go to the masjid as frequently as possible, and realize, brothers and sisters, a khutbah or two is not going to solve the problem. It is a change in my lifestyle and your lifestyle. And the final point of the first khutbah, realize that, subhanAllah, there is no magic cure. There is no solution to all of this. Even if you follow all of these guidelines, it is indeed possible that Allah tests people with calamities and difficulties. Look at the Prophet Nuh alayhi salam and his son, and what happened with his son. And Nuh alayhi salam is a prophet. And Nuh did all of these things and much more than these things. But Allah chose to test him in a certain manner. So, do realize that there is no magic cure. It's a learning process, it's an ongoing process, and we do what we can with dua to Allah, with help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with our own akhlaq and manners, and we put our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.